Claudia had spent 30 years shaping the financial world, but today, she felt like a ghost in her own office. She sat at the long mahogany conference table, her hands folded neatly, masking the quiet storm inside her. Around her, executives murmured in anticipation. A promotion had been promised. A lifetime of experience, about to be recognized. Across the table, Marcus Reynolds, young, sharp, always playing the game, cleared his throat. As we step into a new era, it's critical to position ourselves for long-term innovation, he said smoothly. And that requires fresh leadership. A forward-thinking approach. Claudia felt the shift in the room before she heard the words. We're excited to announce that Jason Miller will be our new Senior Director of Financial Analysis. Silence. Claudia barely blinked. But something inside her cracked. Jason. The 34-year-old golden boy who had joined 5 years ago. Charismatic. Quick with a buzzword. But lacking the instincts, the raw, hard-earned experience that made real analysts indispensable. The room erupted in applause. Claudia felt her pulse slow, her vision sharpen. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. A deliberate, calculated choice to erase her. Marcus turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. Claudia, your contributions have been invaluable. We're hoping you'll continue to offer guidance in an advisory capacity. There it was. The consolation prize. Claudia let the words sink in. Then, with a poised smile, she reached for her glass of water, took a slow sip, and placed it back down without a sound. She wouldn't protest. She wouldn't argue. She would wait. Because this was just the beginning. And they had no idea what was coming. Claudia didn't go home that night. Instead, she sat in her office long after the lights in the building dimmed, staring at the skyline, the empire she had helped build, now slipping through her fingers. Her desk was still cluttered with reports, financial forecasts, models she had refined over decades. And yet, they had called her obsolete. She exhaled slowly, tapping her fingers against the polished wood. If she had been younger, maybe she would have fought. Gone to HR, demanded an explanation. But she wasn't here to beg. She was here to win. Her phone buzzed. A message from her daughter, Lisa. Lisa, Mom? Everything okay? Claudia hesitated before typing. Claudia, fine. Just another long day at work. A lie. But one she needed tonight. She stood, smoothing down the front of her blazer. Then, with a deliberate motion, she picked up the framed photograph on her desk. Robert, her late husband, smiling beside her at a company gala 10 years ago. She could almost hear his voice. If they don't see your worth, make them regret it. Her grip tightened. Yes. That was exactly what she was going to do. The next morning, Claudia arrived at the office with a plan. Not to stay. Not to fight for a place at a table that no longer wanted her. But to build her own. She spent the day watching, listening. Jason stumbled through his first executive meeting, overconfident but underprepared. Marcus was too busy pushing forward his vision for modernization to notice the small fractures forming within his own leadership. And most importantly, Sarah and Raj, two of the brightest analysts in the firm, were being ignored. They were younger, yes, but not Jason's kind of younger. Sarah, an immigrant from India, had worked twice as hard to get half the recognition. Raj had been passed over for a promotion twice, despite outperforming his entire division. They were talented, smart, and underestimated. Just like she had been. That night, Claudia sent 2 messages. To Sarah, let's grab coffee tomorrow. I have a proposition. To Raj, I think it's time you learned how the real market works. She hit send, then closed her laptop. If ConsultPrime didn't value its best minds, she would. And soon, they'd realize their mistake. 3 weeks later, the cracks in ConsultPrime were beginning to show. Claudia watched from a distance as Jason struggled to control what he never truly understood. Clients were growing uneasy. Reports were missing critical insights. The firm's reliance on AI-driven models had led to costly miscalculations, ones that Claudia would have caught in an instant. But she wasn't there to save them. She was too busy building something better. At a quiet cafe downtown, Claudia met with Sarah and Raj. The two analysts sat across from her, leaning in, eager. Sarah spoke first. "We know something's wrong at ConsultPrime. The clients see it. The numbers prove it." "And Jason?" She scoffed. "He's in way over his head." Claudia smirked. "I know." Raj furrowed his brow. "So, what's your play here? Why did you bring us in?" She slid a sleek portfolio across the table. "Wisdom Capital. I'm building a consultancy," she said simply. "One that values skill over appearance. Knowledge over buzzwords. Clients are already looking for alternatives. We're going to be that alternative." Sarah's eyes widened. "You already have clients?" Claudia nodded. "Some of the same ones Jason is fumbling right now." Raj exhaled. "This is bold." Claudia smiled. "It's inevitable." The first defection came 2 weeks later. A high-net-worth investor who had worked with Claudia for years quietly moved his entire portfolio to Wisdom Capital. Then another. And another. ConsultPrime was bleeding clients, but Marcus and Jason were too busy doubling down on their failing strategy to notice who was taking them. Claudia stayed silent, working in the shadows, letting the momentum build. She wasn't just proving them wrong. She was taking everything they thought they had secured. And soon, they'd realize it. 3 months later, the tipping point arrived. At first, ConsultPrime's leadership dismissed the slow trickle of client losses as nothing more than market shifts. But now? They were hemorrhaging business. The firm's top clients, the ones who had built their fortunes on steady, experienced guidance, were leaving. And they were all going to the same place. Wisdom Capital. Jason had tried to salvage the situation, offering aggressive rate cuts and AI-powered projections, but clients weren't interested in flashy promises. They wanted someone they trusted. And the person they trusted had already left the building. Claudia was exactly where she belonged. She sat in the conference room of her new office, overlooking the city skyline. Wisdom Capital was no longer just an idea. It was a powerhouse. Across the table, Sarah and Raj led a meeting with a newly signed client, one that had dropped ConsultPrime just days ago. And Claudia? She leaned back, listening. Watching the next generation thrive, not because of empty corporate slogans, but because they had been given the right foundation. The very foundation ConsultPrime had been foolish enough to discard. Her phone buzzed. A message from Victor Chen. "Victor, Marcus wants a meeting. Says it's urgent." Claudia chuckled softly, setting the phone down. Of course, he did. She could already predict how this would go. Marcus would offer a lucrative contract. A seat at the table. Maybe even Jason's old title. But Claudia wasn't interested in salvaging a sinking ship. She was building a fleet of her own. She stood, smoothed down her blazer, and walked toward the glass doors leading to her executive suite. Her assistant looked up. "Should I schedule the meeting?" Claudia smiled. No need. She had already won. And Marcus Reynolds? He was simply too late to realize it. 6 months later, ConsultPrime was a ghost of its former self. The once dominant financial firm was now a cautionary tale in every major business journal. Analysts dissected its downfall, pointing to its over-reliance on AI-driven predictions, poor leadership, and the loss of its most experienced minds. Translation? They should have never pushed Claudia out. And now? There was no going back. Meanwhile, Wisdom Capital was thriving. What had started as a quiet rebellion had grown into an industry disruptor. Top-tier clients. A growing reputation. And most importantly, an undeniable track record of success. Claudia had done more than build a business. She had rewritten the rules. Instead of a firm obsessed with youthful energy, she had built one that valued expertise, mentorship, and results. Her approach worked. Experience wasn't a liability. It was the greatest asset in the market. Then, one morning, an unexpected email landed in her inbox. Subject: Proposal for Strategic Partnership. Sender: Marcus Reynolds. Claudia smirked. She clicked the email open, already knowing what she'd find. A desperate attempt to repair what he had destroyed. Marcus was offering a collaboration, some kind of joint venture between Wisdom Capital and ConsultPrime. The message was polished, diplomatic. But underneath, Claudia could read between the lines. ConsultPrime was struggling. And Marcus? He needed her to save it. For a brief moment, she considered responding. Then, she deleted the email without a second thought. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding. That evening, Claudia stood by her office window, watching the city lights stretch into the horizon. She had won. Not by seeking revenge. Not by burning everything to the ground. But by proving, undeniably, that they had underestimated her. And now? The future belonged to her. 1 year later, Wisdom Capital wasn't just a success, it was an industry powerhouse. Claudia's firm had redefined the financial consulting world, proving that experience, not gimmicks, was the true key to long-term stability. Her client list had doubled. Her revenue had tripled. And the best part? She did it on her terms. Meanwhile, ConsultPrime was in freefall. Marcus had tried everything: restructuring, layoffs, even rebranding. Nothing worked. The press had turned on him. Former employees spoke out about the company's ageist policies. Clients refused to trust a firm that had let its most valuable minds walk away. Investors pulled out. The board lost confidence. And finally, after months of declining profits and internal chaos, the announcement came. ConsultPrime was shutting down. The company that had once dominated the financial sector was gone. And Claudia? She barely spared it a thought. Because she was too busy signing a deal that would take Wisdom Capital global. One evening, as she prepared to leave the office, a familiar name popped up on her phone. Jason Miller. She let it ring twice before answering. Jason, she said smoothly. To what do I owe the pleasure? There was hesitation on the other end. Gone was the arrogance. The overconfidence. Claudia. I wanted to reach out. A pause. I know things ended badly. And I admire what you've built. Claudia smiled. Of course, he did. Jason was out of a job. ConsultPrime was dead. And now, he wanted a seat at her table. I was wondering, he continued, his voice careful, if you'd be open to. I don't know, a conversation? About opportunities? Claudia leaned back in her chair, staring out at the city skyline she now dominated. Jason Miller. The man who once took her job. The one who had dismissed her, underestimated her. Now, he was asking her for a lifeline. She let the silence stretch, just long enough for him to feel it. Then, with an effortless smile, she said. I think I'll pass. And she hung up. Because Claudia was too busy shaping the future to entertain ghosts from the past. 3 years later, Claudia stood on a stage in front of a packed conference hall. The banner behind her read. The Future of Finance, Experience Meets Innovation. It was the annual Global Financial Summit, and she was the keynote speaker. Executives, investors, and young entrepreneurs filled the room, some of them former colleagues, even former rivals. She adjusted the microphone, scanning the crowd. She recognized Sarah and Raj, now senior partners at Wisdom Capital. She spotted Victor Chen, sitting in the VIP section, giving her a knowing nod. And at the very back of the room? Marcus Reynolds. No longer the CEO of a powerful firm. No longer in control. Just another face in the audience, watching the woman he once dismissed take center stage. Claudia took a slow breath, letting the silence settle. Then, with a confident smile, she began. 3 years ago, I was told my experience was outdated. That wisdom had no place in the future of finance. That the next generation would make me irrelevant. They were wrong. Experience isn't a relic, it's an asset. And when you combine it with innovation, with the willingness to adapt, you don't just survive change. You lead it. The room erupted in applause. But Claudia? She was already looking ahead. Because the game had changed. And this time? She was the one setting the rules. After the applause faded, Claudia stepped off the stage, shaking hands with some of the biggest names in the industry. Reporters swarmed, eager for a quote. Investors lined up, ready to pitch partnerships. But Claudia's mind was already elsewhere. She had bigger plans. Later that evening, she sat in the boardroom of Wisdom Capital, reviewing expansion proposals. Her firm had grown beyond her wildest expectations. Offices in London, Singapore, and New York. A mentorship program connecting seasoned experts with young innovators. A financial think tank advising Fortune 500 companies on long-term strategy. And the next phase? A groundbreaking AI human hybrid advisory service. Because Claudia hadn't just proven her worth. She had redefined the entire game. As she closed her laptop, her assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you." Claudia raised an eyebrow. "Who?" The assistant hesitated. "Marcus Reynolds." Claudia leaned back, letting the name settle in the air. Of course. The man who once dismissed her. The CEO who tried to erase her. The one who had lost everything. And now? He needed her help. A slow smile spread across her lips. Send him in. Not because she needed to hear what he had to say, but because she wanted him to see exactly what he had lost.